You're slow. You've had the day off, Olivia. You're entitled to be slow. You've had a slow day. Well, I hope you have. So we've still got 3 minutes to go. I'm fine, lads. I'm all good. It was snowing this morning and I got all excited, thinking that this Dickensian tour would look particularly Dickensian with snow in the background or the foreground. But unfortunately, the snow has melted, as it often does in London, and a little rain has set in, a little fall of rain, just like Les Miserables. Thank you, Lorraine. It would have been perfect, Beverly, but, you can't control the weather, certainly not in London. So I'm afraid we'll have to settle for damp, squidgy streets. It's a good word, squidgy. But anyway, the idea is that when you finish this tour, or whenever you go, whenever you leave, if you don't stay till the end, it's fine, you will receive an email from Hago, and that's a consent form. And the consent form will be asking you if it's okay to share your email address with listenwithaudrey.com, the audiobook website. And if you say it's okay, then you'll be able to log in to listenwithaudrey.com and claim your free copy of A Christmas Carol. Beautifully read, not by me, I'm afraid, but by an equally amazing performer. They've got some really great audiobook guide readers. And hello, Bernie. Good evening, Bernadette. How are you? I hope you're well, as can be expected. I saw a picture of you earlier. You were smiling. We've got family in tonight. Olivia is my partner, and Bernadette is her daughter. And they're both here with us tonight. So I've got to behave myself. No, Beverly, I'd never heard of Audrey before, but it is an amazing website. And the idea is that it gives you curated versions of famous novels. So it's nothing that you that you haven't heard of. Most of them are classic novels. But the idea is, thank you, Jerry. I'm going to read you the quote which Rob, the curator of Listen with Audrey, wanted me to read. There's a new audiobook app called Audrey, which pairs classic novels with ringing bells. The bells, the bells. Oh, have we got bongs? It's the same tune as Big Ben, by the way. That dong, 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 called the Cambridge Chorus. Anyway, as I was saying, a new audiobook app called Audrey, which pairs classic novels with an expert guide and takes you through the novel and encourages you to slow down, learn, and reflect as you read. Audrey's edition of Dickens' A Christmas Carol is guided by author and Victorian literature scholar Nat Reeve. Audrey is giving a copy of the audiobook to everyone on this tour. And all you have to do is download the Audrey app at www.listenwithaudrey.com, which we'll be posting in the comments at regular points along the way. There we are, you see. Now, you'll also get an email from Hago asking if it's okay to share your details, your email details. And if it's okay, then that means that when you log in to Listen with Audrey, you can claim your free copy of A Christmas Carol. So there we are. There's my little bit of promotion. Thank you, Beverly. I'd love to do audiobooks. I just don't have the time. I'm too busy doing things like this. Good evening. Welcome, everyone. I'm sheltering in the doorway of a rather posh shop in the financial heart of London. And tonight we're going to pay a visit to Leadenhall Market. And I'm quite glad I chose Leadenhall because it's undercover. And that means that I'll be darting ninja-like from one little rain shower to another, creeping along the walls like some London ninja, taking you down dark alleyways, showing you the real-life locations that were used by Charles Dickens in one of his most famous stories. Now, I know you probably don't want to hear about Christmas anymore. Christmas is just a long, distant memory. But the story that we're going to talk about tonight is, of course, A Christmas Carol. And we're in the spot where many of the locations for A Christmas Carol were based. Hello, Chelsea. Hello, Tammy. Hello, Elizabeth. The London Ninja. I'm not a scary ninja, honestly. So we are outside a very famous building. This is called the Royal Exchange. And it's been here in one form or another for a long time. But Dickens, Charles Dickens, would have known it quite differently. And that's because it's been built and rebuilt over the centuries. And most notably, it was destroyed in the Great Fire of London in 1666. Before that, it looked rather different. But this is the building that Charles Dickens would have known and would have loved in some ways, hated in other ways. Now, this used to be the financial heart of the city. This was the place where deals were made, where money was exchanged, where the rich financiers came. A lightsaber. Bernie, it was a lightsaber. It is my ninja umbrella. Okay, so I can just whip it out at a moment's notice. My umbrella, I mean, I didn't know where I was going with that one. So if it does start to rain heavily, I shall whip it out like Kill Bill with an umbrella. That's the plan. So this is the Royal Exchange. Now, let's see how the rain's doing. Oh, now it's fine. It's absolutely fine out here. Let me give you a little different view of the Royal Exchange. It was destroyed in the Great Fire of London in 1666. But for a long time, it's been the financial heart of London itself. And this was used as the setting by Charles Dickens. So here's some pictures of what the Royal Exchange used to look like. Along the way, for those of you that haven't done this kind of thing before, I'll be posting pictures. And you can see these pictures full screen. And you can also keep in the chat as well at the same time. Hello, Peter in Brisbane. I won't even ask what time it is where you are, because I'm sure it's early. Beverly, you see Gucci nearby, so there is indeed still a lot of money exchanging that goes on here. But this was a place that Dickens knew well. In fact, Dickens knew most of London. There we are, I thought it was early. Dickens knew most of London very well. And he walked the streets of London, as you probably know, 15, 20 miles a day. And that was so that he could gain experience and gain characters for the novels that he would come to write. So Charles Dickens knew this area well. And in 1843, he started writing his greatest Christmas hit, A Christmas Carol. And this was where the story would begin. In fact, in the very opening sentence of A Christmas Carol, it mentions this building. But you might not notice it if you read the book. Here's the grand entrance to the Royal Exchange now, by the way. The Royal Exchange has changed function in many ways, and now it's rather a posh restaurant and dining area. Lots of expensive shops in there as well. Now, the reception isn't so good in there, but I've got a couple of pictures so that I could show you what it looks like. So that's the new Royal Exchange, built by a contemporary of Christopher Wren after the Great Fire of London. And this is where the character of Scrooge is first mentioned. This comes from the opening lines of A Christmas Carol. And right from the start, the exchange, the Royal Exchange, the place of the moneylenders, the place of the rich bankers, is mentioned. Marley was dead, to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it, and Scrooge's name was good upon change for anything he chose to put his hand to. Now, when Charles Dickens said good upon change, what he means is good on the exchange, because that's where Scrooge worked. That was one of the places that he visited and made his financial transactions. Thank you very much, Polly. So the Royal Exchange was a place that he knew well, and he used it at the very start of the story. But he also used it a bit later, when the ghost of things yet to come takes Scrooge on a journey. I'm sure you all know the story. Don't worry, Rose, we've only just begun, in the words of the Carpenters. So it is also mentioned later, and that's when the ghost, one of the three ghosts that visit Scrooge, takes him on a journey, and it takes him to a very familiar place. It brings him here to the exchange. And outside the exchange are three wealthy Victorian bankers. So these are some of his colleagues, if you can call them that, some people that have worked with Scrooge. But it turns out, of course, that none of them actually liked him. But there they were. Now we're going to get into the four ghosts discussion. Yeah, well, you could actually say that only one of them was a ghost and that the other three were spirits. So how's that for a discussion? Because the first one was the ghost of Jacob Marley. The other three were the spirits of Christmas, the spirits of things yet to come. So, yeah, you could argue that really there was only one ghost. But I'm not going to argue because I don't like arguing. Anyway, this is where Scrooge meets these bankers. He's shown them in a vision by the ghost, and he's shown his own death. And he's shown how the bankers react to his death. There they were, in the heart of it, on change amongst the merchants, who hurried up and down and chinked the money in their pockets and conversed in groups and looked at their watches and trifled thoughtfully with their great gold seals and so forth. As Scrooge had seen them often. The spirit stopped beside one knot of little men. Observing that the hand was pointed to them, Scrooge advanced to listen to their talk. "No," said a great fat man with a monstrous chin. "I don't know much about it. I only know he's dead." "When did he die?" inquired another. "Last night, I believe." "Why, what was the matter with him?" asked a third, taking a very large quantity of snuff out of a very large snuff box. "I thought he'd never die." "God knows," said the first. "What has he done with his money?" asked a red-faced gentleman with a pendulous excrescence on the end of his nose. "I haven't heard," said the man with the large chin. "Left it to his company, perhaps. He hasn't left it to me. That's all that I know." This pleasantry was received with a general laugh. "It's likely to be a very cheap funeral," said the second man. "For upon my life, I don't know of anybody who will go to it." So this is one of the scenes in A Christmas Carol, where Scrooge is being shown his future and what's happened after his death. And this is enough, of course, to make him change his ways. The great transformative tale. Now I thought I'd show you the front of the Royal Exchange, seeing as the rain has now stopped, which is very exciting. So I'll be able to give you a view of the Royal Exchange as it's been rebuilt after the Great Fire of London. There it is, rebuilt in this amazing Romanesque style. It's quite beautiful. But this used to be the house of the moneylenders, the house of the bankers. And of course, Scrooge was the worst of them. Scrooge was the man that was renowned as a miser, renowned as a man who was very careful with his money. But now, of course, this has all changed. Hello, Kathleen. Hello, Suzanne. Hello, Agatha. We're just outside the Royal Exchange. We're going to make our way to Leadenhall Market, where we're looking at this equally amazing building called the Royal Exchange. And this is where Scrooge often came in Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Now, I was talking about the weather earlier and saying that it's a little cold and damp tonight. And this morning it did snow. Now, that's pretty unusual, especially in London. But, oh, it looks like it's watching you with window eyes. That's creepy. Let's see the name on the building again. Of course we can. Anno Elizabeth Regina, the first, of course. Anno Victoria. So restored in the reign of Queen Victoria. Built in the reign of Queen Elizabeth. That's basically what it's saying. The rain on the ground makes for good photos. There we are. I'll focus on the floor all the time. No, sorry, not all the time. That would be silly. So Scrooge's character comes here often and eventually meets these bankers who make him realise the error of his ways, along with the spirits or the ghosts that come to him over the course of the night. But he worked in a different place. Now again, Charles Dickens travelled all over London and he knew London intimately. And when he wrote A Christmas Carol, he wanted to use some real life locations that he'd already been to so that it would be kind of geographically accurate. A ground tour, exactly. I could call it Ground Zero or something. I was talking about the weather, by the way, saying that it's... Oh, they're on to me. The police are coming. Sorry, we did get ambulances, sirens, many times here in London. So I was talking about the weather and saying that the weather tonight is rather soggy and mild, and that this morning there was snow, and it was actually a lot colder. But it was even colder in the time of Charles Dickens. The River Thames itself became frozen at various times. When Charles Dickens was young, he would have heard stories about this. So this Dickensian idea, this stereotype of London being covered in snow, the sort of thing you see in postcards of London like this one, pictures of a stereotype Dickensian London, they're actually true. And that's because London was a lot colder in the time of Charles Dickens. London, and indeed the whole of Europe, had been undergoing a kind of mini ice age for the last century or so. And that meant that London really was a cold and foggy place. In fact, it got so cold at times that the Thames froze. And although it didn't freeze in Charles Dickens' lifetime, his parents would certainly have known about the frost fairs that used to take place here. I'm posting some images at the moment of some of these frost fairs. And this is where the Thames became so cold, so frozen over, that people could hold parties on it. They went out and they partied on the ice. In fact, on several memorable occasions, they led an elephant across the River Thames because it was so frozen. Do I know that places around the Big Bear received 600 inches of snow in less than a month? I didn't know that, but that's far too much snow for me. I'd be quite content with just a light spattering of snow, just to give it that kind of Dickensian feel. But no, not here. I'm afraid London is mild and soggy, and that's the best that we're going to get. 50 feet? No, that's way too much snow. That's excessive. Actually, I'm quite glad now that I'm in London and that it is only soggy and mild. Exactly, the elephant Maria must have been very confused. So Ebenezer Scrooge visited the Exchange often, but his actual counting house his office was somewhere different. And it's down the road that we're walking along now. And again, Charles Dickens had some very specific ideas about where to set this story. And one thing that he wanted to do was to create a dark alleyway. And of course, there are lots of dark alleyways here in the centre of the city. And I'll show you some of them, like this one. Thank you, Darren. Here's Bull Court. And as you can see, a long, dark, spooky alleyway. But this isn't the alleyway that Charles Dickens was thinking of. And the people that study the book and have made kind of inquiries into it, that they've studied the text, and they've tried to work out exactly where Charles Dickens based Scrooge's counting house. And they worked out that it was in the sound of the bells of a local church, which they think was St. Michael's. So that narrows it down. Now, the road that we're walking down, we're going to find another alleyway, which is almost certainly the one that was based, on which Scrooge's counting house was based. And that's because when he came here, he could hear a church when he was working in his office. Now, I am going to give you a Adam shot at the moment. There we go. This is St. Michael's Church. And the bells of the church were said to be ringing out while Scrooge was in his counting house, counting up his money. So he could hear the bells of this church in the background. Now, for those of you that have just joined us, by the way, we're doing a collaboration with an audiobook company called listenwithaudrey.com. One of my various social secretaries will post a link to it shortly. There we are. Olivia, she's on the ball. She's got it in 0.2 seconds, quicker than Google. Are we going to go into the halls and the market? We certainly are. We're heading towards Leadenhall. But first of all, I wanted to show you these sites that are meant to be the locations of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. So this is the church that was supposed to be the one that Scrooge could hear while he was in his counting house. The ancient tower of a church, whose gruff old bell was always peeping sillily down at Scrooge, was always out of a Gothic window in the wall. But today it became invisible and struck the hours and the quarters in the clouds, with tremulous vibrations afterwards, as if its teeth were chattering in its frozen head. The cold became intense, piercing, searching, biting cold. So again, this description by Charles Dickens of the cold in London at the time is accurate, because London was a lot chillier than it is today. But right opposite that church is almost certainly the alley where Scrooge's counting house would have been if it was real. And this is it. This is Newman's Court. Even spookier than the other one. So again, the bigwigs, the literary people have done their work, they've done their research, and they've decided that Newman's Court is the most likely place for Scrooge's counting house. And it is, when you go into it, even now, rather horrible. The counting house, of course, has been immortalized, not just in the book, but in various plays and films. And they've done their best to create what they think it would have looked like. Here's a picture that I've just posted that kind of shows what it would have looked like at the time. Why are they called courts? Jerry, there's lots of courts in London, and the courts are little alleyways where all sorts of business and transactions used to take place. There's also the Inns of Court, which are very close to this area, and they're the legal heart of the city. Once upon a time, of all the good days in the year, on Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy in his counting house. It was cold, bleak, biting weather, foggy withal, and he could hear the people in the court outside go wheezing up and down, beating their hands upon their breasts, stamping their feet upon the pavement. The city clocks had only just gone 3, but it was quite dark already. It had not been light all day, and candles were flaring in the windows of the neighbouring offices, like ruddy smears upon the palpable brown air. The fog came pouring in at every chink and keyhole, and was so dense without that although the court was of the narrowest, the houses opposite were mere phantoms. To see the dingy cloud come drooping down, obscuring everything, one might have thought that nature lived hard by and was brewing on a large scale. Again, this amazing description by Charles Dickens of the terrible weather at the time, the freezing fog. He uses the fog in many of his stories, often as a metaphor for the legal fog that also ensnared the city. So that is likely to be the place where Scrooge's counting house would have been. But Scrooge, even Scrooge, sometimes needed some form of entertainment. Sometimes he needed to go for a drink, and he would go to his local pub, the tavern that was nearest to where he did his work. And that's where we're headed next. It's spattering a little bit, Olivia, but I'm doing my ninja thing, you see. Look, right here, next to the wall. And so I'm managing to maneuver around the rain. And I also look incredibly dodgy while I'm doing it. But that's okay. It's that kind of tour. So here I am, doing my ninja walking to avoid the rain that has just started. But we're heading towards a pub, an old tavern. And this, again, is meant to be the tavern where Ebenezer Scrooge drank. And it's the place that he went to occasionally to have one drink before he returned to his chambers. Scrooge took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, and having read all the newspapers and beguiled the rest of the evening with the banker's book, went home to bed. So as you can see, he didn't spend a long time there. Now the pub isn't this one. The Jamaica Winehouse is pretty atmospheric and a lovely, typical London tavern. But this isn't the one that I meant. There's another one, even older and even further down this dark alleyway. And what it's called is something quite memorable. We're going to the George and Vulture. I don't know how the Vulture comes into it. The George, I assume, is St. George. But the Vulture, I'm not sure where that comes in. But this is the George and Vulture. And this is meant to be the pub, the tavern where Scrooge spent his melancholy evening, looking at his banker's book, drinking an occasional glass. The George and Vulture. But then, of course, Scrooge went back to his home, his residence, and there are plenty of places around that could easily do the job. The trouble is that much of this place has now been destroyed. So the Great Fire of London destroyed much of the old city of London. The Royal Exchange was completely burnt, St. Paul's was destroyed, Leadenhall Market was partially destroyed and then partly rebuilt, and we'll see that very shortly. Now, hello to everyone that's joining us. Now, I do need to let you know that we're doing a partnership tonight with an audiobook company called Listen with Audrey. And the idea is, thank you, Olivia, the idea is that after the tour, you'll get an email from Hago asking if it's okay to share your email address. And if you say that it is, then you'll be able to log in to listenwithaudrey.com and claim your free copy of A Christmas Carol, read by an expert audiobook narrator. Not me, unfortunately. I'd love that. But they do have a wide range of narrators, and it's also a kind of curated audiobook website. So the idea is that you get experts in the field, experts in literature and history, that guide you through the book. So there we are. That's an extra bonus. So we were talking about where Scrooge might have lived. And unfortunately, many of the old buildings in the city have gone now. But we do get a very good description in A Christmas Carol of the kind of place where Scrooge would have lived. He lived in chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner. They were gloomy suite of rooms in a lowering pile of building up a yard, where it had so little business to be that one could scarcely help fancying it must have run here when it was a young house, playing at hide and seek with other houses, and forgotten the way out again. It was old enough now, and dreary enough, for nobody lived in it but Scrooge, the other rooms being all let out as offices. The yard was so dark that even Scrooge, who knew its every stone, was fain to grope with his hands. The fog and the frost so hung about the black old gateway that it seemed as if the genius of the weather sat in mournful meditation on the threshold. So that's the description of where Scrooge might have lived. But now we're heading away from the tale of A Christmas Carol, and we're heading instead towards Leadenhall Market. As for Ebenezer Scrooge himself, even his name is rather unusual. And there's several different theories about where Scrooge came from. Where did Charles Dickens base the character of this famous miser? One of the theories is that it was from an MP, a Scottish MP, called Ebenezer Scroggie. And John Elwes was another man, also said to have inspired the tale of Ebenezer Scrooge. This is John Elwes. He was the MP for Berkshire. And the young Elwes learned much of his miserly mindset from his uncle, though his mother, who reportedly starved to death because she refused to buy food, despite being rich, probably played a role as well. And he would sit around complaining about the way other people wasted money while sharing a single glass of wine between them. So that's one of the characters that is said to be the inspiration for the real-life Ebenezer Scrooge. So Charles Dickens did his work well. He based his characters on the people that he knew, the people that he saw around the city. And he also based his locations on the places that he walked to. And he walked everywhere. Now we're walking past a rather amazing restaurant, bar, and it's called Cross Keys. The original Cross Keys burned down. There's a club underneath it. It's called the Gaucho Club. Not to be confused, of course, with the Groucho Club, which is completely different. But here you can see the Cross Keys restaurant. Now I'm going to give us a little peek inside. There we are. You can see how posh it is. Rebuilt again in the 1700s after the Great Fire of London. And rebuilt recently, renovated, given extra columns and pillars inside. And it looks dreadfully expensive. So expensive that I don't even dare to step inside. But what I can do is look in through this remarkably clean window. There we are. Sorry, diners, to disturb your dining experience. So this is one of the many alleyways that lead off from the financial heart of the city. Bell Inn Yard. That was one of the other pubs that used to stand on this spot. But we're nearly at our major destination. Oh, there's a plaque, look. You see? Site of Cross Keys Inn, destroyed 1666. Now, one place that Charles Dickens knew a lot about was markets. Markets feature heavily in his books and also in his sketches by Boz. When he was a journalist, he had a nickname. His nickname was Boz, and he used to walk around London commenting on all the places that he visited. And many of those places were markets. And of course, markets feature in A Christmas Carol. The market is the place that Scrooge sends a servant to in order to get a turkey for Bob Cratchit. But there are many other markets around the city, including Smithfield and Billingsgate, two of the most famous and the most beautiful. And they were all designed by the same man, the man that also designed Leadenhall Market. And that's where we're heading next, across this rainy road. Now, I can't walk like a ninja here, so I'm just going to walk quickly and hope to dodge the raindrops, which is quite a ninja thing to do. There we go. We made it without getting too wet. Bull's Head Passage. As you can probably guess, many of the names of these inns and of court and names of these alleyways are based on pubs, because there's an awful lot of pubs around here. Many of them were for the rich bankers that used to work here and that still do work here. This is still the financial heart of London. Your brother's wedding photos were taken around Smithfield. I like this. You ready for a pun? Oh, I do like a good pun. Planet of the Grapes. Very popular too, by the look of it. So here we are, I'm doing my ninja thing again, hugging the walls, avoiding the little showers. But we're nearly there, we're nearly at a destination, we're nearly at Leadenhall Market. Now, Charles Dickens had a very different conception of what markets were like. He talks in one of his books about Smithfield Market being full of pigs and blood, offal and meat. And that's because most of the markets in this area at the time were meat markets. But this market has been changed over the centuries, and it's incredibly old. In fact, it dates back originally to Roman times. They found evidence of a Roman settlement under here. This was the heart of Roman Londinium. And this is the description that Charles Dickens gives of a market similar to this one. The poulterers' shops were still half open, and the fruiterers were radiant in their glory. There were great round pot-bellied baskets of chestnuts, shaped like the waistcoats of jolly old gentlemen, lolling at the doors, tumbling out onto the street in their opulence. There were ruddy, brown-faced, broad-girthed Spanish friars, and winking from their shelves in wanton shyness, and glancing demurely at the hung-up mistletoe. There were pears and apples, clustered high in blooming pyramids. There were bunches of grapes, planet of the grapes, in fact, made in the shopkeeper's benevolence to dangle from conspicuous hooks, that people's mouths might water gratis as they passed. So this is Charles Dickens' description of one of the many markets that he would have visited at the time. But this one was built originally in 1321. That's how old it was. And when it started, it was very much a market like Charles Dickens would have known, a meat market. But it's changed a lot. In 1881, it was rebuilt with wrought iron and glass. In the 15th century, this area was donated to the City of London. It was donated by a person that owned it, who had been the Lord Mayor himself. The Lord Mayor 3 times, in fact. His name was Dick Whittington. And yes, he was real. Hello. Not just a pantomime character, he was a real person. He was Lord Mayor of London, and the panto was based on his exploits. Hello, Katerina. Thank you, Joanne. Now you can see they were doing work on that side of the market, but we're going to go around the corner and give you a much better view. There are several entrances to the market, and the entrances also reflect the significance of the entrance to the market. Some were more important than others and much bigger. So Leadenhall Market was originally built in 1321, and it was built as a cattle market, but eventually it changed. And from the 1800s, it became much more exclusive. Here we go. It's also a setting for many films and documentaries. There we go, there's a good view. Most famously, it's been used in a film you might have heard of, because this was the place where Diagon Alley, or parts of it, were created for the Harry Potter films. There's one particular shop front here that was used as the entrance to the Leaky Cauldron. So this was used by J.K. Rowling and by the film company as the entrance to Diagon Alley. There we go. There's the royal crest up there. So this was designed by the same architect that designed Billingsgate and Smithfield, a man called Horace Jones. And in 1990, it was renovated. The whole area was spruced up. And now it looks the way it would have done when it was first opened in all its glory. Merchant House. You could still see the old names of the places that would have been here hundreds of years ago. The aliens have landed again. The green glowing lifts going up and down the huge office blocks. But here's the view that everyone loves. This is the main entrance to Leadenhall Market. Now, Leadenhall Market, of course, was a meat market to start with, so it was full of sheep and cows and cattle. But now it's herding a different type of customer. City workers. They're all herded in, penned in like sheep. If only they knew the irony. And this is where they come for their drinks after work. Now let me get back and I'll give you a view of the entrance, because the entrance is really quite stunning. The rain has stopped again, which is handy. There we go. So this is one of the two grand entrances. I'm not quite sure about the alien. Space Invader, I think. Thank you, Mike in Leicestershire. But this is one of the grand entrances to the market. And Charles Dickens would have known this market in a very similar style, because it'd been covered up since the 1700s. Here's a picture of it. I'm also going to post some pictures of Leadenhall Market as it looked back in the old days. Olivia, somehow you've got a Christmassy feeling. I wonder why that would be. That's because I did a Christmas tour here, talking about pretty much the same things, about the origins of Ebenezer Scrooge and A Christmas Carol. And we also finished up here at Leadenhall Market. And there was an amazing Christmas tree up here at the time. So yes, you're right. It is does give you that Christmassy feeling. Now, the building itself was destroyed at various stages and rebuilt. The Great Fire of London, as I said, destroyed part of this building, and it had to be rebuilt again. But even before that, there were Roman villas here. There was a basilica, an old Roman church. This was the heart of Londinium. The picture I posted shows the plan of what this area would have looked like back in Roman times. And underneath Leadenhall Market, they found these old Roman ruins. So let's go and take a look inside the market, and I'll show you some of its interesting features. So the colours that were used to recreate Leadenhall Market were based on the original paint design that was used in Victorian times. Roman ruins are literally everywhere. They certainly are. Certainly in London. But most of them are under the ground, under very expensive buildings. Now I'm going to make my way past the herd of bankers, penned in. Look, you see even the name, the Lamb Tavern. They just don't know how ironic this is. Number 13. Uh-oh. Unlucky for some. And one of the most beautiful things about this market is the vaulted roof, the vaulted ceiling above us. And here we can get a look at it. Wow. That is quite beautiful. The lamps, I suspect, are genuine gas lamps. There's about 5,000 gas lamps still in operation all around London. And there are still people that work for British Gas that keep them in operation. It was damaged in World War II as well. So was Smithfield, so was Billingsgate. Many of these great buildings were damaged during the war and then had to be rebuilt. Scaffolding. Oh, what a relief. I thought, I was getting near the end of the tour and I thought, I haven't seen any scaffolding yet. Exactly, Heather. I thought something was badly wrong. But there we go. Scaffolding, you see, that's happens on all my tours. It's guaranteed in the contract. Now, I said that this was an old meat market, and you can still see evidence of that, because what they've done is hung up the hooks outside these buildings. And these are the hooks on which the carcasses of various animals would be displayed. And these hooks are still there. Thank you very much, John. So all the way down this row of shops, you've got the hooks that would have been used to suspend various carcasses of meat. So that gives you a clue to the origins of this amazing market. So it was used as the setting for Diagon Alley as well, in the Harry Potter films. Charles Dickens would have known it as very similar to this kind of market. And he, of course, really enjoyed spending money on his friends and family. That was one of the reasons that he ended up writing A Christmas Carol. You see, although A Christmas Carol is all about a man who is obsessed with money and capitalism, actually the reason that Charles Dickens wrote it was because he was short of money. The savage irony. He'd spent too much money on his new houses, his partying lifestyle. He loved to entertain his friends, huge dinner parties, and he would come to places like this to buy his goods. And he realised he needed to write a bestseller. And he wrote one in around 4 weeks. His agent, his publisher told him, you need to write a hit. And that's what he did. In just 4 weeks, he managed to pen A Christmas Carol, which has become the quintessential Dickens Christmas tale. Is my gimbal working? It is working, I think. I hope it is. I apologise if it's a little shaky. I shall try to keep it as steady as possible. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really quite pleased that I've not got soaked and freezing during this tour. You can probably see how cold it is. My breath is frosting in the air in a very Dickensian way. Thank you all very much for coming this evening. Now, I do need to remind you again that you will be receiving